Let's have a prayer. Thank you, Father, for your love and goodness. Bless and guide. Oh, Father, please help us to take advantage of the beautiful things that you have provided. We invite thy Holy Spirit to be with us and teach us in Jesus' name. Many people have told me they thought that was Katharine Hepburn, but it's not. It's Ursula Angeline Dence, my wife, my mother, my children. And we were married 57 years together. And she died of malaria in Africa. There's the whole family. In the back row and left to right is Joyce, and then Ursula, and then the big guy in the blue shirt is Joshua. And he was a patient. He was schizophrenic. His wife brought him out of the mental institution after 16 years in a mental institution. They'd been divorced. And I took care of him 7 months, and he went back to teaching school. Then comes May, and then my son David, then my son Calvin Jr., and around the corner in the white dress is my daughter Gloria, and then my son Marvin, and then my son Stephen. Stephen, for 40 years, he married my nurse down in Mexico, and for 40 years he's been a nature doctor here in Texas and Mexico. Then comes Melody, and then Laverne, my baby. Laverne is 56 years old, and Joyce, my oldest, is 69 years old. So it's quite a family. We homeschooled our kids, and on a 400-acre farm. And my church pastor turned us in as skipping school. And the state sent out inspectors, and they found that we had better books, better program than any other school in the district. And he said, as long as I'm superintendent of this public schools, no one will ever bother you again. And he sent a newspaper man in a Sunday special, Syracuse Herald Journal, a Sunday special, a front page and an inner page, 2 pages in a big city newspaper. They had the story, their children play hooky from school. And they showed 5 or 6 photographs of our greenhouse and of the children working and doing things. And I don't regret a bit of it. It's the most beautiful thing that ever happened in my life.
Did you tell them you delivered them all at home?
Not all of them. 2 were born in the hospital, but I was present. But one, Melody, next to the last, I delivered her myself on a gurney in the delivery room in the hospital in Rome, New York. What happened was we got there late at night, and about 9 o'clock or so, the doctor examined her. He said, this baby's not coming till morning. I'm going home. He lived far away. And I said to my wife, I might as well go home too. And she said, no, you're not. She grabbed my shirt tail. She said, this baby's coming tonight. And so I hung around, and she started very frequent, fast, hard labor pains. And I went and told the nurse. The nurse was half asleep in a waiting room or something, and I woke her up. I announced to her that my wife was in hard labor, and she said, help me to push the gurney into the delivery room, and I did. We took her out of bed and put her on the gurney and put her in the delivery room, and she said, you stay here and watch her while I go call a doctor. And before she got back, the doctor said, you know, back then they got $350 for delivering a baby. I've delivered 37 babies myself for nothing. But anyway, the doctor said, hold that baby till I get there. He wanted to collect that $350. When she got there, I had the baby delivered, laying beside her mother. All the doctor had to do is cut the cord when he got there. I had to pay him $350 anyway. But anyway, it's been so much fun to work with sick people without robbing the last dollar before you kill them. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't want to be negative. I love life. I love people. This is my beautiful wife, Ursula. We were 57 years together. She had long red hair below the tip of her fingers. And she died in Africa of malaria on one of my mission trips. I almost died. My daughter cost her $4,000 to come get me, bring me home in a wheelchair. That's my youngest son on the left. He's 11 years old and weighed 80 pounds. The one on the right was 10 years old, a patient of mine up on the 400-acre farm, and he weighed 300 pounds. We put him on a fast, and after at the beginning of the fast, no, after the fast was over, my wife said, "You can have one fruit. What would you like to eat?" Oh, he said, "I like apples." And my wife said, "That would be fine. How many do you want?" He said, 20. And my wife knew better, but anyway, she played the game. So she washed up 20 apples and put them on the table with a knife and a little can to put the garbage in. And he ate one apple and half another one. He said, "Mrs. Dence, I'm full. I can't eat anymore." He didn't realize that your stomach shrinks when you fast. Maybe some of us need the same thing. This poor guy, Bob Sweat, he was from Michigan, I believe. He had a wife and several children, but they brought him to me directly out of a iron lung. He had polio. He was completely paralyzed, quadriplegic. They brought him right out of an iron lung and delivered him to my house to take care of him. He was 6 years in an iron lung. He was 6'4" and weighed 67 pounds. He was a living skeleton. His legs, I put my fingers right on, touched my fingers together around his ankles. He was so thin. Any medical doctor would shoot me if they knew what I did. I put him on a 3-day fast. It didn't happen what you're thinking. He gained 7.5 pounds and never lost it. It's so simple. I like prunes. I soak them in water overnight and they swell up and they're bigger and heavier in the morning. He was a prune and I hydrated him. That's all he had was water for 3 days. And he gained 7.5 pounds and never lost it. And when he came, he was on, he had to be suctioned every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. Thank God he gave me 8 children. We took turns to get up in the night every 15 minutes to suction him to get the mucus out of his throat. We had to start up a little electric pump and stick a tube down about 16 inches down his throat and suck all the slime and mucus out. And I'll tell you about the slime and mucus later. And anyway, finally, he got better and better. And when he came, he had a tracheotomy. He couldn't talk. He just had to be fed liquids. But he got better and better. And what I've discovered was the most horrible torture I ever heard a human being going through. They had him on 24 hours a day artificial respiration. How many of you know what a rocking bed is? 2 hands, 3 hands, 4. A rocking bed, here's the bed, here's the patient laying flat, and it has an electric motor, and all night long, zoom, 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 zoom. When your feet goes down, your intestines drop down and it pulls air in your lungs. When your head goes down, the intestine come and bump your diaphragm and push air out. And then when your feet go down, it pulls air in. Air out, air in. Air out, air in all artificially. It saved his life. And then the next 12 hours a day, he paid $650 for a March of Dimes respirator. And that was the most horrible invention I ever saw in my life. It quit working. Sabbath morning, my wife and I and children all ready to go to church. We had him all fixed up so he wouldn't need it. That's after we got, he didn't have to be suctioned quite so often because of our care for him. But anyway, he was sure that he's going to be all right for 3 hours while we went to church and back. And just before we drove out, just before we got in the car, the respirator that he was on quit. So I told my wife, you take the car and the children, go to church. I gotta put him back on the rocking bed, repair the respirator, and then put him back on the respirator. Well, when I took that apart, you won't believe what I found. All that air was coming from a vacuum cleaner motor that had armature and brushes that shoots out carbon, no filter, and he had to tube in his mouth to breathe all of that carbon from the armature and the brushes and that electric motor. They at least could have put a filter in. That's why he had to be suctioned every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. His name was Bob Sweat. I said, Bob, I fixed the machine so it was working. I said, Bob, you are going to get off of this machine or die. You're going to die anyway, so we're not losing much, maybe a few days. I said, I'll stay with you. I'll give you mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I'm not going to let you die. But I said, you've got to get off of this machine. It's killing you. It's the most stupid machine I ever saw in my life. And he agreed. I stood by him. I could imitate what we went through, but I'm not going to. He suffered. 1 hour. No, it was a half hour at a time. I did half-hour intervals. What I mean is, I did a half hour today, an hour tomorrow, an hour and a half the next day, 2 hours the next day. In 24 days, he was free for 12 hours a day from that respirator. And so all he had left was his rocking bed. He was so delighted, so happy to get rid of that and have 12 hours of better freedom. Like I say, he's quadriplegic. He couldn't move anything. He could just move his head from side to side. That's all he could move. And he was so happy that he bought a van, hired a chauffeur, and before that, I put him in a wheelchair and wheeled him up front. I was the elder of the church for 11 years, Camden, New York, and put him in a wheelchair and wheeled him up front. He couldn't even talk when I got him, and he preached a sermon. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he preached a sermon, and he was so happy to be free from that respirator that he hired this van and a chauffeur. He said, I want to see all the national parks in the United States before I die. And so they drove him all over the country, and I wish the story would end there, but it didn't. The one day in the wintertime, the chauffeur left the van with him in it and was gone too long. He got pneumonia and died. It's sad. But anyway, his son, he was brought up Seventh-day Adventist. His son lost his way. He lived in Texas, and he realized that he was going down the wrong road. He prayed to God. He said, Lord, make me like my daddy so that I can get close to you. He was working in a factory in Texas. Got in his car and drove home that evening. had a green light, went through the green light, and a big truck had a red light, smashed into him. He's just like his daddy. Quadriplegic. Be careful what you pray. This man was schizophrenic. The first one I showed you with the blue shirt on with my children, my family, was schizophrenic. And this guy, Ted Zelka, was from Denver, Colorado. And he was schizophrenic. He was the first one, Josiah, was in the mental institution for 16 years. This guy was in a mental institution for 6 years. And did anybody ever know Dr. David Glenn from Colorado, Loveland, Colorado? Anyway, David Glenn was a very good friend of mine. And many times he called on me, paid my plane fare to fly out to Denver, to Loveland, Colorado, and treat some of his patients. And one patient was a burn patient. The doctor himself was guilty of the burns. I can't see with glasses, I can't see without them. Anyway, so I went to treat this burn patient. The doctor paid my way to fly out there. He picked me up at midnight in Denver and drove me out to Loveland. And I treated the burn patient. God worked a marvelous miracle. There's no money in it. He just paid my plane fare out and gave me something to eat and a place to sleep. That's the way I've been working for many, many years. Anyway, the burn patient, in just a few hours, had all new flesh growing on his legs. What happened was, the doctor ordered the nurse to put hot fomentation on the legs, and he forgot to tell the nurse that he was paraplegic, paralyzed in the legs. The nurse cooked both legs from his big toe to 4 inches above the knee on both legs. Dr. Glenn believed that God would help me to heal him. So he gave me 2 nurses. He said, they'll do anything you want done. They're your nurses while you're here. So anyway, I soaked his legs in golden seal tea, and then I made a poultice of, I actually made some oil with plantain in. It takes 3 hours to simmer it in, don't boil it, just simmer, heat the oil for 3 hours with dry plantain leaves in it. And then after 3 hours, strain it, and I borrowed a sprayer, perfume sprayer from one of the patients in the hospital, and I dumped the perfume out and rinsed about 20 times to get the smell out. And I put my plantain ointment in there, and then I called Dr. David Glenn to come in. He was a surgeon. I said, I want you to be here when I take the boots off this guy. Now, what I mean by the boots, they had dried, caked up plasma, they had bandages, they had sulfa drug, they had everything packed around those legs, all stuck and scabbed up, a horrible mess. And so I told Dr. Glenn I wanted him to be there when I took the boots off. And so I soaked his legs. I sent one of the nurses down to the hardware store to buy some deep waste paper baskets, and soaked his legs in golden seal tea for 1 hour and softened up all of that garbage on his legs. And so I called for the doctor to be present when I took that off, because I knew I had to cut a bunch of blood vessels, and I'm not a surgeon. So we started above the knee and just peeled that stuff back, just like taking a boot off. And he had to cut 13 times. He had to cut blood vessels and put a hemostat on it to close it up. And then when they got all the crud off, just got complete bare human flesh with all that stuff off. And so he had to burn or cauterize each one of those blood vessels to keep it from bleeding. So that was his job. And then he left the rest up to me. So I sprayed on the plantain oil, and then I made a poultice of comfrey and slippery elm, and put that on both legs. And that was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Left that all night. 10 o'clock the next morning, I called for Dr. David Glenn to be present. I wanted to see what happened when I took those bandages off. He broke down and cried. Every 3 inches, all over both legs. There's a little white bud sticking out like a bud on a tree. He said, I've studied that. I know what it means. It's all new flesh. Within 2 weeks, he had all new flesh on both legs from those burns. I used some aloe vera in between too. But anyway, that man and Dr. Glenn was taken to court. They sued him $300,000 before I got there. Because of the healing so fast of those legs, they went back to court and they dropped the fine down to $150,000. So I had the privilege of saving the hospital, Loveland, Colorado, Dr. David Glenn, $150,000. I didn't get anything out of it. I did it because I love people. I love God. So Dr. Glenn said, you're having such marvelous success. I believe you could heal my friend. I said, who's your friend? He said, Ted Zelka. That's the guy on the screen. I said, what's wrong with Ted? He's in a mental institution, dubbed a schizophrenic. I said, what makes you think I can help him? Well, he said, I just believe you can. He said, if I discharge him from the hospital, will you take care of him? I said, sure. I didn't know what I was getting into. But anyway, I had driven partway, and then I had flown the rest of the way. So I had to put him on an airplane and get back to my car, and then I had to drive him 14 hours to my home in New York. And every time I stopped at a red light, he jumped out and run down the street. He was 6'4", weighed 240 pounds. I'm 5'8" and weighed 150 pounds. I had to wrestle him down and put him back in the car. After the third time, I figured it's enough of this. I'll never get home this way. So I hog-tied him. I tied his legs together, tied his arms together behind his back, and I don't know how I got him in the back seat, but I laid him down there somehow in the back seat. And then I drove all the rest of the way home 14 hours without any trouble. You know what I found out about schizophrenics? Not all, but many schizophrenics are schizophrenic because they hate somebody. God is love. Hate is the opposite of love. When the first man that was with my children was 16 years in a mental institution, this guy was 6 years in a mental institution. When I found out who they hated and got them straightened out, that person, the schizophrenia went away. Anybody that hates somebody is devil-possessed. God is love. Hate is satanic. You get the Satan out of a person, get God in their heart, and the person will get healed. Praise God for such simplicity. This guy, Ted Zelka, his wife got there a week after I did to my home. She brought her 4 children. It was his mother he hated. He was an only child. His father died. his mother became very, very possessive of her son. And mothers, please listen. You'll learn a lesson. Don't just possess your children, love your children. Anyway, he was 28 years old. She wouldn't let him have a girlfriend or anything. And so he was an auditor, bookkeeper, accountant. And he came home one night, and just he and his mother lived alone. And he knew what he was going to do. He said goodnight to his mother and went up to his room on the second floor. He had previously put a ladder up to his window. And he locked the door in his bedroom, went out the window, down the ladder, went and found a girlfriend and got married, had 4 children. He hated his mother, tried to kill his mother several times. He hated his wife and children, tried to kill them several times. That's what the schizophrenia is all about, and that's why he was put in a mental institution. His mother never saw the children until they were in my home. It was winter time. After I got Ted to my house, she came along a week later with the children in the car, and he tried to kill me. He tried to kill himself first. I had an old McCormick Deering tractor, the iron lugs on, you remember those? And I'm talking old time. And that's what I used to run my sawmill. Broke my arm trying to crank it up. It backfired and hit me there and broke my arm. Anyway, I love that tractor. But Ted knew that in the wintertime to start that tractor, I had to put some ether in that carburetor. When I put a little ether in and crank it, the tractor start right up in cold, 0 weather. Ted took that ether can, took it in his bedroom, crawled under the blankets, took the cover off, and spilled the ether all over. He was going to die under his blankets. My son, Calvin Jr., walked by the bedroom window. The window's open, and he smelled the ether. And he came and told me, he said, Daddy, Ted is messing with the ether in his bedroom. Go quickly. So I went and I put the blankets back. I grabbed the ether can and threw it right out through the window. And my son picked it up and took it down in the woods and stomped it into the snow and covered it up so nobody could find it. And Ted started fighting with me. He took that finger right there and put it at a right angle. It doesn't go that far, but he put it that far. And he wasn't going to let it go. He's bigger than me. We were standing up now in his bedroom. I've always been quite supple. And I put my hands on his shoulder and I jumped up in the air and put my legs right around his belly. I got a scissor hold and I squeezed and squeezed until he passed out. Fell on the floor and then he let go of my finger. I mean, there's more than one way to treat a sick person. Anyway, I counseled with his wife. She was there and she knew what happened. She said, take him back to a mental institution. You shouldn't mess with him anymore. So I took him back to Rochester, New York. Interned him in a mental institution. Of course, at home, we prayed and pleaded with God to do something. This is what God did. God inspired him to call his mother. And he found out, I mean, he hadn't talked to his mother in 6 or 7 years. He found out his mother was on her way to Boston, Massachusetts for a Christmas reunion with her family. And he begged her to stop in Rochester, New York on the way. She was on Greyhound bus, and he wanted to see her. She stopped in. Folks, the hate disappeared. She got on the bus, headed for Boston. Ted got on the phone and he said, Dr. Dence, please do me a favor. My mother's on the bus heading to Syracuse, New York, going to, in a horrible, heavy winter, December snowstorm. He said, would you please intercept that bus and invite my mother home to meet my wife and children she's never met. And so I did that. I risked my life in that horrible snowstorm. And every person getting off the bus, I asked, is your name so-and-so? Every woman. And finally, she was one of the last ones off the bus, and I got her and took her home with me. She was happy to get off of the bus in the snowstorm. I took her home. I had this 400-acre farm. I had a cabin down in the woods with a fireplace in it and several beds, and had a spring of water outside, and had an outside toilet outside. I loaded up the horse in a bobsled that I haul firewood with, and I put the mother and the mother-in-law and the 4 children in the bobsled and harnessed up the horses and pulled the sled down to the cabin about 2 miles away on the other side of my property, way back in the woods. I said, now, I'm going to leave you guys here 4 days. I'll be back in 4 days with the horse and the sled, and take Mama back to the bus. A lot of healing took place, folks. A lot of God-inspired healing took place between the mother and daughter-in-law and grandchildren. And I went back and got him with a sleigh and took Mother back, Grandma, back to the bus, and she went on her way. The phone rang. It was Ted. He said, Dr. Dence, the doctors here in the mental hospital has taken me off of all drugs. They've discharged you. Will you come and get me? I said, gladly. And so I got in the car and drove to Rochester, picked him up, and brought him back. He and his wife and 4 children, along with me and my wife and 8 children, lived in this farmhouse for 7 months. We had a good time. And next picture. There's Ted, his wife, 4 children, my old farmhouse. There's Melody peeking around the corner, my daughter. The Dickie dog. See the shepherd dog with a white collar? That's why I call him Dickie. A woman with a white partial blouse on is called a Dickie. So we named the dog Dickie. Anyway, Ted drove his wife and children back to Colorado. 22 years later, I got a package in the mail. They never paid me a penny. I got this package in the mail, and it was a Kodak Retina 3 camera made in Germany. At that time, it was one of those open and closed up deals. And he said, Brother Dence, I feel like I owe you something. He said, I'm going to give you this camera. Anyway, and he was working in a Boulder sanitarium for 22 years after that. It's a lot better than being in a mental institution. There's my wife, Ursula, with the red jacket. And this is Marvin on the right. Marvin was my patient. The others just friends of mine visiting. By the way, this girl, the lady with the dark glasses, I asked her to marry me when she was 3 years old, and I was about 3 also. She calls me once in a while, reminds me. She's my age now, about 88, 89. And she kids me about it once in a while. I went to school with her husband, academy. Anyway, the patient is the big guy with the black jacket and the boots on. His name is Marvin Blank from Utica, New York. And Marvin was 20 years old, weighed 300 pounds. He was a student at Atlantic Union College, South Anchor, Massachusetts. Thank God his brother was there in school with him. But Marvin couldn't go up and down stairs. At 300 pounds, he couldn't go to classes, a lot of stair steps. So he decided to commit suicide. He was in the process of killing himself when his brother found him. His brother tall and skinny. And his brother rescued him, put him in the car, and drove him all the way back to New York, about 600 miles. and brought him to my place. Told me what happened. I promised Marvin, if you will cooperate and do what I tell you, you will not have to commit suicide, you will lose weight, and you can learn to live again. So he promised to cooperate. I put him on a 15-day fast, water only. When the 15 days was up, I said, Marvin, I'm going to have you break your fast now and you start eating. He started crying. He said, please don't make me break the fast. He said, I've never felt so good in all my life. I said, okay, I'll let you fast, but you've got to quit when I ask you to quit. He voluntarily went 59 days and lost 80 pounds. He willingly went 59 days, lost 80 pounds. I kept him 7 months. No money exchange, just the fun of helping people. And he went back to school, graduated as an x-ray technician, married a lovely lady, and had 3 beautiful daughters. That's a lot better than committing suicide. Oh, I could tell you so many stories. Sister Bellinger was a lady. What am I doing? Running out of time. Oh, come on. 8 minutes and 32 seconds. I'm just going to show you the pictures and quit telling stories, I guess. But anyway, graduating from school and marrying a wife and having 3 children is a lot better than committing suicide. I was just going to tell you about Sister Bellinger. She was an Adventist. She had cancer and she was doomed to die. She said, Brother Dence, when you take care of people, do you let them eat meat? And I said, no. And she said, then I can't go to your house. I got to go to the hospital. And anyway, she went to the hospital. She was dying. I heard that she was going to die the next day. I went to visit her. The hospital wouldn't let me see her. I said, listen, I'm the only pastor she's ever had. She needs a pastor now before she dies. They let me in. She wouldn't even look at me. She had her face to the wall. She had the curtains drawn. She didn't want any fresh air, didn't want any sunlight. She was heavily drugged, morphine and so on. Anyway, I just talked to her and I prayed with her. And I left. Oh, before I left, the nurse came in and grabbed her and set her and slammed her down in a chair and slammed down some food and cursed and swore and went, I forgot your medicine. She went out and got the drugs and came back in and gave her the medicine and shoveled the food down her throat. And while the nurse was out to go back and get the medicine, she just looked up once and looked at me and she says, Brother Dance, when you have patients in your house, do you force them to take the medicine? I said, no. By that time, the nurse came in. Oh, she said, do you force them to eat? I said, no. I give them free will. She put her head back down because the nurse came in. She didn't want to see anybody talking. She didn't want the nurse to see she was talking. Anyway, I had a prayer with her and I left. About 4 hours later, my phone rang. It was her son. He said, Brother Dance, Mother wants to come to your house to die. I said, okay. I said, you arrange for the ambulance, bring her out here, I'll take care of her. Anyway, first thing she asked me, you going to make me take this medicine? I said, no. You going to make me eat if I don't want to? I said, no. I said, what would you like? She said, a nice hot bath in a tub. 6 months I haven't had a bath. They scrub you down a little bit in the bed, with a cloth. I fixed up the bathtub. She couldn't walk, couldn't stand up. I had my wife get her all undressed and put a big bath towel over her. I came in, I picked her up, and I carried her in, carefully laid her in the tub with a bath towel on top of her. And she soaked there for an hour and a half. I put some Epsom salts water in the water. She relaxed so nicely. She loved her bath. She lived for about 3 weeks. And I did that about twice a day. 1 hour Epsom salts bath. Anyway, she praised the Lord. And my wife at night, on a Friday night, she heard a little moan and a groan, and my wife quickly went in and said, Sister Bellinger, how's it going? Oh, she said, I'm okay. My wife said, just go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning. She said, yes, I'll see you in the morning. She didn't realize she was talking about the resurrection morning. She died right there. Took her last breath at that moment. I'll see you in the morning. This is Faith House. She had epilepsy. I treated her. She got completely free from the convulsions. I gave her Bible studies. She was baptized and joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Her mother got mad at me and took her away from me. I was going to educate her along with my kids. The mother took her off of the beautiful diet I put her on and everything. And while she was walking to school, she had a convulsion, fell on the sidewalk. Some neighbor lady called. They didn't have 911 back in those days. They got a hold of a hospital and took her to the hospital. They found out she was one of 16 children and no father. And the state, New York State, made her a ward of the state, a human guinea pig. They started experimenting with drugs. She's got bandages on her arms and legs, and I'll go quickly. This is part of it. That scab, she came home on a weekend. She said that scab was driving her crazy. There's something wrong there. I took it off, and it was all full of grubs underneath. They were letting flies crawl on it. The hospital was experimenting. They were letting grubs grow underneath that scab. I took the scab off and got rid of the grubs. Anyway, her urine was more blood than it was water. And here she is in this picture. She has no right arm. She has no legs. Her left arm is on there, bandaged up. Within 24 hours after I took this picture, they cut her left arm off. She's totally blind in her left eye, totally deaf in both ears. She had to lip read. That's the only way she could understand people. She's still alive. She's 70 years old. My daughter's 69. She's 1 year older than my daughter. She's still alive. Still a human guinea pig. Pray for her, Faith House. My wife and I decided we wanted to be missionaries. I had this 400-acre farm. I had an auction, sold everything in one day. It was worth $350,000 back then. It was worth probably $3 million today because they bought it and divided up the 400 acres in building lots. Anyway, I had an auction one day and sold everything. 13 riding horses, my landing strip for airplanes, my sawmill, house, farm, land, everything. Sawmill for $25,000 in one day. I just wanted to get the world off my back. I wanted to work for the Lord. I told the Lord in 1953, Lord, if you'll take care of me, I'll take care of your people. So this is the day we left to go to Mexico. I ran the hospital down there, 22-bed hospital, 10 years. And then I went to South America and ran a floating boat hospital for 8 years. Down in Mexico, I had a sign out, closed on Saturday and closed on Wednesday. Why did you close on Wednesday? Okay. I took every patient, I had an average of 12 intern patients all the time. I took every patient that could walk, put them in my Jeep, drove them up 13,000 feet up on the top of the Sierra Madre Mountains, took some watermelon with us. We took our shoes off and waded in an ice-cold stream of water about that deep, fine gravel. We got a good foot massage walking on the gravel barefoot and eating watermelon. When the melon was gone, why, we put our shoes back on, and I paired up my patients in couples. And I said, I gave them a plastic bag. I said, you guys pick these flowers. You guys pick these leaves. You guys dig these roots. My patients manufactured their own medicine. It was a beautiful therapy. Up in the mountains and everything. And the very medicine that they picked and harvested, I put it in, dried it, put it in the capsules and herb tea and stuff like that. And that's why it doesn't cost me anything, because it doesn't cost anything to pick herbs. And the patients did it. I didn't have to pay them. Anyway, so word got around that this guy treats people with hydrotherapy, massage, fasting, chiropractic, and Jeep. That's the only new car I ever bought in my life. With the $25,000 I got from selling my farm, I drove up to Texas. I bought this Toyota Land Cruiser, 1972 Toyota Land Cruiser at $5,000. You'd pay $35,000 or $40,000 today. Anyway, let's go. They furnished a beautiful home for me by the hospital. I couldn't stay there because 24 hours a day, people get off the bus. I was on the main bus line out in the country, and people get off the bus, not here. This is where my hideout. I bought this piece of land at the foot of that Monte Pilon. And so I drove to the hospital every day so that I could sleep at night. Otherwise, people get off the bus and tap on my bedroom window. Doc, get up. I got 11 kids in Guatemala. I got to have my treatment and get back home right away, take care of my kids. So anyway, I built a house out there, and the medical doctors scoffed at me. They said, you're so backward you don't even have running water. I said, I beg your pardon. I said, my wife grabs a pail and runs to the river. That's running water. We had a beautiful garden there. Anyway, let's go. This is the hospital. Dr. Juan Mejia built this. He was a Seventh-day Adventist dentist in Montemorelos, Mexico. And he built this hospital and didn't know just what he was going to do with it, except he dedicated it to running it according to the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. And he chose me to be the man to run it. And that's a long story. I can't go into it, how I happened to get down there. But he called me one day, and I had made a statement. I was elder of the church there at Camden, New York. And when I left Mexico, I made a statement that I would, if I was ever invited to do missionary work in Mexico, I would do it. But when I got back and saw my church stand there, I made a counter statement. I said, as long as that church stands there, I'll never go to Mexico. You know, God hears everything. You can't hide anything from him. And 3 weeks later, my phone rang 4 o'clock in the morning. It was my neighbor lady who was milking cows in a barn about 500 feet away from the church. And she said, your church is burning down. The furnace blew up, automatic oil-driven furnace. 3 days later, my phone rang again. It was Dr. Juan Mejia. He said, Brother Dence, I want to open up this new building as a hospital dedicated to natural medicine. Will you come? I started to say, as long as the church... I said, Dr. Mejia, I'll be there in 90 days. And that's when I had the auction, sold everything I had. It was worth $350,000, sold it $25,000, and took off with the car and the truck and went to Mexico and ran this hospital down there in Mexico. I was 10 years in Mexico, and then my wife and I moved to Colombia, South America. In Mexico, we had 3 of our youngest children, and my mother-in-law, her husband had died, and so we took her along to Mexico. And we all volunteered our work in the hospital. This couple, hippie couples, I delivered a baby for her. She was 9 months and 2 days pregnant, walking, hitchhiking with a pack on her back. And anyway, they weren't husband and wife, just hippies running around. They got back to California. They bought another pack sack and put the baby on their back and took off for California, hitchhiking. And 12 24 years later, when the baby was 24 years old, Steve, the man, called me and said that he didn't want to be hippie anymore, and the woman that gave birth to the baby didn't want to give up hippie life. He went to college, inspired by what I was doing. He became a full-blown 4-year graduate chiropractor, and he's down in Escondido, California, a very famous chiropractor. He called me 24 years after he did all of that to let me know that I had inspired him with what I was doing. This is my office, and this is my wife with the cat. The children named the cat 1492. I don't know where they came up with that. But anyway, this is my wife with my grandchild. That's the hospital in the background. And those are tangerines, the biggest, beautiful, juiciest tangerines I ever had in my life. And that grandchild of mine now is a mother of 2 children that are married and have children of their own and college graduates. That's my youngest son on the right. He was still with me at the hospital. That's the pastor's wife on the left. And what's in the basket and what's the big tuber by my son's left knee is a root of a calabacita. I changed the name to Consterina. I dried it, powdered it, put it in capsules. 1 capsule a day will take care of any number 2 diabetic. You won't have to take any insulin or anything, just 1 capsule a day of this root furnishes enough vegetable type insulin substitute to take care of your pancreas. You don't have to take insulin. And actually, you get off of drugs and get rid of your diabetes. I've taken over 800 people off of drugs and put them on natural medicine, and they've got along just fine. This is my little house down there in Mexico where we had the special running water. My wife did something funny one time. We had an irrigation ditch running right by the house. And she got in a galvanized bathtub and paddling herself down the irrigation ditch. This girl wanted to learn about herbs. That's chickweed she got on top of her head. She had the straw hat on, and she was sweating to death, and she was complaining. I said, "You dummy, throw that straw hat away and put some herbs on your head." The law of refrigeration is evaporation causes cooling. The straw hat has no vapor in it. The herbs have vapor. You put it on your head, and the sun shining on it and the wind blowing through it acts like a refrigerator, cools your head. This is the house I built out in the country. No electricity, no running water, except 2 lakes. This is my wife inside the house. How do you like my stair step? I took a log and took a chainsaw and cut the steps in. Up on top in the loft, we had beds up there for visitors. This is down in Chiapas, Mexico. I built a church there in Yerba Buena. These are Chamula Indians. Come on, gotta push the right button. What did I do? I locked up something, I pushed the wrong button. I can't see the buttons, I just have to feel them. Somebody help me? It's, the forward button, I want to push it backward, yeah. Oh, I got it, good. This is Laura. She was a graduate chemist. She started making her own drugs and messed up her body. She couldn't sleep. Anyway, I took care of her for a month and got her back to sleeping normal again. Come on, you dummy. I can't see. I pushed the wrong button again. So I back up, then I go forward. Here we go. All right. This is the hospital staff. Right to left is me, and then Ursula, and then Chaito, which is now my daughter-in-law for the last 40 years. And the other one is Margarita Limon. She's now a graduate medical doctor. This is my office. The jars are all jars of herbs. Oh, it smells so beautiful when you take the cover off those jars. This lady is diabetic, and she had diabetic gangrene in both legs. She didn't like the life without meat. She had to have some meat, and so I told her I can't furnish her meat, and she went home. She died 11 days after this picture. This is my daughter-in-law, my son's wife's sister, Martha. She had myasthenia gravis. The drug the doctors give for myasthenia is prostaglandin. Any medical doctor tell you the day that you miss one dose of prostaglandin, you will die. But this girl was 28 years old. She'd been 4 years on prostaglandin with myasthenia gravis. She knew she was going to die soon anyway. She begged me to get her off the drug. She got permission from her mother. She got permission from her pastor. She got permission from a medical doctor, a friend of mine. They said, if you can get her off the drug without her dying, go for it. So everybody was in harmony. So by the grace of God, I took her off of prostaglandin. She lived 4 beautiful years afterward, completely alive and alert and happy and intelligent and everything. I kept her in my hospital for 3 years. She became a cook. And then she went to live with my son and her sister for another year. And then she went back home to live with her mother. Mother would not follow the diet. She put her back on meat and milk and eggs and fish and chicken. And she died. Anyway, this is Don Bedoya's boat in Colombia, South America, where I spent 8 years running a hospital boat. He's pushing 20 tons of potatoes down the river. And it's a big story. I can't tell it. I got to go. This is my wife showing movies. 80 people sitting on the deck of my boat watching spiritual, religious movies. And beautiful sunrise, sunset. Here's my hospital boat. 65 feet long, 18 feet wide, 2 stories high. I had nobody back me up. No family, no church, no government, no institution at any time backing up. We just told the Lord, you take care of us and we'll take care of your people. And so we lived 8 years on this boat. This is the laundromat. My wife and one of my helpers out in the middle tied up to a log upstream from the boat to keep it from drifting down. The water along the shore is muddy, but out in the middle is a little bit cleaner to wash clothes. Flowers on the boat, sunrise, sunset, boat at Christmas time. Here's a cattle boat. They haul 1,000 cows. The name of that cattle boat is Sansón, means Samson in Spanish. And there were some of my neighbors. I was one of 37 boats on the whole Meta River, Colombia, South America. And 37 boats, and mine was the prettiest boat on the river. No joking. This is the Meta River. This is my wife talking to the Indian chief with a checkered jacket on. He's the only one who spoke Spanish. I had 34 mothers bring 34 babies. There was an epidemic of fever and diarrhea and vomiting and all of that. And I made such a simple medicine, it's unbelievable. I mixed up half and half honey and charcoal, thank you. And filled a 4-ounce Gerber's baby food bottle, a jar, with each one. And I told the Indian chief, I couldn't talk to the ladies, I talked to the chief and he talked to the women. And said, give them a teaspoonful every hour until the jar is empty. They did that. I said, I'll be back in 3 days. If anybody else is sick, I'll take care of them. When I got back in 3 days, I tooted the horn. Nobody came. So I tied up the boat and went and looked up the chief. You don't talk to an Indian without getting permission from the chief first. And anyway, I found the chief, the guy in the checkered jacket, and I said, how come? I tooted the horn and nobody came. He said, nobody's sick. They're all well. This girl, I baptized her, and she, by the way, in South America, they gave me a ministerial license. I was a Seventh-day Adventist minister for 8 years. And I baptized this girl, and she had this tumor on her throat. I treated it just like I treat lumps in the breast. I had 11 women that had lumps in the breast. I treat them for 30 days, and the lumps are all gone. Everything is healed up. Anyway, this girl had this gigantic tumor on her neck. After 15 days, the pus all came out. That's my wife's fingers squeezing the pus out. Was she happy or not? Yeah. 30 days. That tumor was all gone. It wasn't even a scar. This is one of the... I treated 70 villages and 7 tribes of Indians along the river. One trip every year, 5,000 miles. And going to Bogota, Colombia, here we are in a bus. Look at the river way down below. About a half a mile or more down below. Every year, a whole busload of people go down there and kill everyone on a boat. I took a picture out the bus window with the dual tire hanging. Before they put that cement on there along the curb, I took a picture of the dual tire hanging right over the edge of that concrete. I mean, that's why the buses go down in there once in a while. Once the wheel falls off, the bus rolls right over. This is my boat in motion. Here's the day that I pulled up there, and 35 babies were sick with this epidemic. The 35 men, the fathers and the husband, as soon as I pulled up, all 35 jumped on one side of my boat. Well, what does that do to the boat? It's going to roll upside down. I put it in reverse, automatic transmission, and gassed it and backed up, and all 35 fell in the river. Anyway, I saved their life and my life too. This lady, her name is Evangelista Gaitan. How old is she? She's 125 years old. When I came back a year later, I treated her. She had back trouble. I gave her hot fomentations and a chiropractic adjustment. And I came back a year later. She's 126, and she was out hoeing in the garden. This is a stalk of bananas. There's Calvin with a white beard.
That's your paycheck?
I'm sorry?
That was one of your paychecks, right?
That Evangelista Gaitan, yeah.
No, the bananas are your paycheck.
That's what they pay you.
Your paycheck.
They paid you with bananas.
Wages.
I don't know what your question is. Anyway, yeah, okay. They paid me by bananas, if that's what you... Yeah. That stalk weighed 125 pounds. And here's my wife with... every year, we took 2 new girls and 2 new boys to teach them how to be medical missionaries. And so there's 6 of us on the boat all the time. My wife and me and 2 girls and 2 boys. And the little girl is the one that I baptized, and she's the one that had the tumor on her neck. The boat had to be repaired. I was the captain, I was the administrator, I was the doctor, and I was the mechanic, and I was the sea captain, everything. Anyway, I had to cut that all out with a torch and weld in a new piece of metal and paint it 3 times in and 3 times out. I did dental work. Look at those teeth. This is after I got done, all in one day. I don't know, 2 extractions, 11 fillings, and 2 root canals. Didn't cost her a penny. You don't have to charge money for a hospital. When God is with you, everything comes fine. Oh, I wish I could tell you about this. I just don't want to take any more time than I have to. But I was giving Revelation studies in a Catholic school because the teacher invited me. The priest came in one day about after 5 weeks of teaching. The priest came in and he said to the teacher, "I have you know I'm the only one that's allowed to teach religion in this school." He turned around and walked out. The teacher said, "You got to leave now." And he tapped me on the shoulder as I was leaving. He said, "My kids want a boat ride. Could you take them for a boat ride 3 o'clock in the afternoon?" I said, "Yes, come on down." They came down and got on the boat. We drove down out of sight of the village, around the corner. The teacher tapped me on the shoulder. "We don't want a boat ride. We want to hear more of Revelation." Ellen White said when she was in heaven, everything looked like silver and gold. I was in heaven. Look at that. That's the Metro River, silver and gold. That's the biggest catfish I ever saw in my life. It was 12 feet long. His mouth was... I got to turn it off? Okay. I'm sorry. Let's have a prayer. Thank you, Father, for your love and goodness. Forgive our past. direct our future. Oh, Father, we're not here to entertain self. We're here to help others. Bless this place, bless the meeting, bless each one here. Amen.